Okay. Yeah. La la la. Okay. Anyway, sorry you had to hear that, but isn't it kind of cool how you can actually hear what I'm saying right now, seeing as I've recorded this like way before you've actually seen it? So the fact that you're hearing me right now wouldn't even be possible unless back in 1877, Thomas Edison invented the phonograph. So a phonograph works by someone speaking through the tube, and that tube vibrates, and the attached stylus to the tube creates scratch marks onto the cylinder, and as you turn the cylinder, you can create more waveforms in etchings as you're cranking it. So after you are done making your recording, you would crank it back to the beginning, and then the stylus was placed at the beginning of the waveform, and as the machine was cranked, it would play back through the tube and you could hear what you were saying. The very first sound recording was actually Thomas Edison reciting Mary Had a Little Lamb.
Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow, and everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go.
And so this idea of sound recording created a new market for entertainment, right? People were like, wow, I can actually go and listen to somebody who's talked in the past, right? Like I can hear someone who recorded this on Monday and it's now Friday. That's never happened before. I've never been able to do that. And people would actually go into theaters and hear recordings of things on the phonograph, which seems amazingly silly. Like, why would you go into a theater today just to listen to something that somebody has already recorded? Anyway, so this created the whole notion of a voice without a body. So the human voice was now a thing apart from its creator. Just like my voice and image right now are a thing apart from the live performance that I did while recording this. And this whole idea of audio recording totally dismissed the need for storytellers. So people who made a living off of telling stories and sharing history were pretty much out of a job. And more importantly, this created an immortalization of the human voice. So I guess what you can say is tinfoil, the media that the first sound was recorded on, technically is a new media. This stuff, right here, new media. But in order to make that claim, I think I need to define what new media is, right? Because you can't say that something is something else until you define that something else and see how it fits into the definition. So in my search in the great vast internet, I happened upon a few definitions of the word new media, and unfortunately a lot of them involved the use of the word electronics, computers, internet, which doesn't really help me. So perhaps I can change them around to help them prove my point that tinfoil is a new media. So good old Wikipedia defines new media as the on-demand access to content anytime, anywhere, on any digital device, as well as interactive user feedback, creative participation. Another aspect of new media is the real-time generation of new, unregulated content. Now that really, really doesn't help me at all, because this stuff is not electronic. And this definition does not work at all, and quite frankly, I totally disagree with that definition. New media is so much more than that. The second one I like a little bit more. It's from Webipedia. Webipedia defines new media as a generic term for the many different forms of electronic communication that are made possible through the use of computer technology. The term is in relation to old media forms, such as print newspapers and magazines that are static representations of text and graphics. Okay, well, I guess that's a little bit better. I mean, they still use the word electronic and computers, but I suppose if I just take that out, new media does start to kind of fit in there. Because it was a form of communication back then, right? It was the first time that they were able to record sound, and sound is a way of communication. By that I mean through voice. And when it talks about it being in relation to the old media forms, I mean, I guess that really brings into mind the question of it being new media, right? How can tinfoil be new media if it is old media, right? And then I went to a really good place to find a definition of new media, the New Media Institute. This institute defines new media as the 21st century catch-all term used to define all that is related to the internet and the interplay between technologies, images, and sound. In fact, the definition of new media changes daily and will continue to do so. New media evolves and morphs continuously. The fact that new media evolves and morphs continuously is really something that I can use to prove that tinfoil is new media. Because if it's morphing and changing continuously, that means back in 1877, media was changing and morphing, right? If something is changing and morphing now, probably was doing it back in 1877. But I feel like in order for me to really get at the core of this, I need to define what media is. So, back to the internet. So, quite simply, dictionary.com defines media as the plural of medium, the means of communication. Okay, that's pretty simple. I can tie that quite in with this, because at the time when the first human sound was recorded, the idea of tinfoil being used as a recording medium was new, right? It was a new medium for sound recording. And quite similarly, on Wikipedia, it was defined as the storage and transmission channels or tools used to store and deliver information or data. Well, that's perfect. Tinfoil was definitely something that was used to convey information, to convey data, to record sound, to project sound, all of that kind of stuff. Alright, that's perfect. So now what I can say is in 1877, tinfoil was a new media because it was the new medium for recording sound, conveying information, recording data, immortalizing the human voice. But there's still some unanswered questions. The first one is, how can it be new media when it was in 1877? 1877 is definitely not new compared to 2013. So to answer this question, we can go back to the definition that I found from the New Media Institute, saying that the definition of new media changes and morphs daily, right? So I assume if it's morphing and changing now, it was morphing and changing back in 1877. And yes, back in 1877, it was not as advanced as it was today. They didn't have, you know, the laptops. We didn't have the camera that I'm recording this on. We didn't have the microphone that I'm recording my audio on. So you have to imagine that back in this time frame, the whole idea of recording something onto a piece of tinfoil and playing it back, recording the human voice, was an amazing new concept. And it was new at the time, right? You know, when the iPhone 5 comes out in 2013, it's a new amazing thing. When you record the human voice onto tinfoil using a phonograph in 1877, it's a pretty big deal. But this poses a little bit of a problem, because something can't be defined as new media if there wasn't any old media as a reference to it, right? If this was considered the first time the human voice was recorded, then this can't be new media. Tinfoil can't be new media. But I'm gonna let you in on something. It wasn't actually the first recording of the human voice ever made. The actual first recording of the human sound was made in 1857, 20 years prior to Thomas Edison's phonograph. A man by the name of Edward Léon Scott de Martinville actually made something called a phonautograph, which was a piece of soot-colored paper wrapped around a rotating cylinder carried on a threaded rod. There was a stylus attached to the diaphragm, and through levers it traced lines on the soot by the stylus, sensing the air pressure changes. And as sure you can imagine, that drawing lines on soot wasn't so great compared to this awesome tinfoil business. And it really wasn't actually that great. Here's what it sounded like. So if you can believe it, that was a woman singing Au clair de la lune. So I guess Thomas Edison didn't make the first recording in general, but he made the first one that actually sounded like something. So the whole idea of tinfoil as a recording being new media actually holds true now, because it wasn't actually the first media for sound recording. So, by that definition, it is a new media. It wouldn't be a new media if that other recording didn't exist. I mean, if it didn't exist, I guess sound recording in general would be a whole new media, and the whole combination of it would just be new media. So in conclusion to that point, because a form of sound recording already existed, tinfoil is new media. So I guess that brings us to today, right? How can today I say that tinfoil is a new media when it's not used for sound recording anymore? So is tinfoil still a new media, or was it only a new media from 1877 until the next thing came around? Well, personally, by the definitions we've accumulated so far, tinfoil isn't really a new media, because it's not being used for anything new. It's not a new medium. It's been around for a long time. I mean, this is similar to the fact that you can't call a film camera new media today because we have digital cameras. Maybe something is only a new media until something new comes around, a newer new media. Perhaps the whole idea of new media needs to be reworked to actually say that tinfoil is a new media. So I guess another question we can ask is, was tinfoil a new media before it was in the phonograph? So I dove into a bit of the history of tin and tinfoil to get an idea of what it was used for before it was used in the phonograph. And through my great internet study, I came up with the fact that tinfoil was used a lot in dentistry. So a quote I found here was, "In 1783, I stopped a considerable decay in a large double undertooth on the outside of the crown or near the gums with fine tinfoil, which lasted a good number of years." This came from A Practical and Domestic Treatise on Teeth and Gums by Mr. Sigmund in Bath, England in 1825. So the fact that he was using tin, or tinfoil, in 1783 means that tinfoil was definitely around. It just wasn't used for sound recording yet. So apparently tinfoil could be injected into a cavity and it would stay there for a good number of years. Tin has a stronger affinity for acidic, citric, tartaric, malic, lactic, and nitric acids, and it has a greater affinity for it than teeth do. A dentist tried many other materials for plugging up cavities, and they all didn't end so well. They ended in pain, infection, inflammation, and tin was the only one that seemed to make it heal up nicely. And so tinfoil was definitely around even before 1800, but it wasn't actually used to record sound or to cover food like it is today. The whole idea of covering food with tinfoil didn't actually start until about the 1940s. So tin and tinfoil was really just an industry material or a dentistry material before it was used in the phonograph. And there was no even need for it to be in its foil form until it was used in dentistry. Okay, so this can bring me back to one of the definitions I had before, where new media is the term for many forms of electronic communication made possible for the use of computer technology. So if I take out the words electronic and computer, it seems to kind of fit in. It was a form of communication made possible through technology. And a lot of times when people think of technology, they think of computers and iPods and cameras and all that kind of stuff, but that's not what it is. The actual definition of technology is the branch of knowledge that deals with the creation and use of technical means and their interrelation with life, society, and the environment, drawing upon such subjects as industrial arts, engineering, applied science, and pure science. Of course, tinfoil is a technology. It was created and used technically in all of those fields, in the industrial arts, in engineering, in applied science, and in pure science, and in the science of recording sound. Definitely answers the question. Tinfoil was not a new media before the phonograph. But I'm still stuck on whether it still is now, because tinfoil didn't become a communication or documentation method until it was in the phonograph. So the answers to all these questions really make you think about what new media is. All these definitions talk of technology and computers, but it really all boils down to communication and storytelling and documentation, and all the different ways that we do these, all the different ways that we communicate our feelings, our beliefs, our thoughts, happenings, events. So all it really boils down to is new media is storytelling. So does that mean that tinfoil is storytelling? Because logically, if I say that new media is storytelling and tinfoil is new media, then in order to make that definition ring true, tinfoil has to be storytelling. Well, I've just spent this entire video going through the history of tinfoil, diving into everything that it's used for, and questioning whether or not it's a new media. Well, of course it is. Tinfoil has a history. It has a story. A story from how it was just tin, an everyday metal that was used in the industry, to a metal that was used in dentistry, to an object that immortalized the human sound. The whole idea of recording human sound was revolutionary. It changed the whole idea of documentation, storytelling, communication. It made it a whole entirely new thing. So then you now know that tinfoil is a story. You know what it is, where it's been, what it was used for, what impact it had on the world, what impact it had on the future of communication and recording and documentation. So, yes, tinfoil is storytelling. Tinfoil is new media. So thank you so much for watching. All my information is in the description below. There is a link to a video on how tinfoil is made if you want to check that out. Thanks for watching me put a tinfoil suit on. Bye! Oh my god, these glasses are horrendous. Tinfoil mitten. Oh, tinfoil mustache. And so now, no. Fine, tinfoil arm. Don't fail me now. Fine, tinfoil arm. Fail me now. Oh my god.